Alicia, I'm so excited to have you on this. And I know our listeners are really excited too, because so many of them are in the same exact situation that you were in your team. And I mean, you have come years, I know, in learning ITR and really navigating these large government systems for art therapists and also trauma work. So, would you give us a bit of your background and where you've come from?
Sure. So I started in, well, a lot of art therapists start like either majoring in art or majoring in psych and then minoring in the other. So I majored in painting in undergrad and then I minored in psych. And then for my graduate work, I was in Eastern Virginia Medical School and I graduated in 2008. And so I've been an art therapist for a little over 15 years now. And I've been familiar with the ITR process for a little over 8 years now. Um, that being said, I have out of my whole career, I've worked for, and I know we wanted to focus on the government agency part because that is the hard part. I worked at 2 state level government agencies and 2 federal government agencies. So I've got a pretty good idea what it's like to be an art therapist in a large government agency. um, and I just want to say, and I'll say it now and I'll say it later too, if you are an art therapist working for any type of government agency and you don't feel supported or you don't feel like you can do your complete job or trauma work, don't wait for support. If you have the desire and the means, get trained in whatever you want, because you just don't know when opportunities will arise.
Why did you choose to get trained in ITR?
So I was working in a federal government agency at the time, and everyone they had already been doing the ITR there, and I hadn't been trained in it. I was the only art therapist there, and I had heard of it. Everyone's heard of it who is an art therapist. Linda Gant is pretty much like a superstar in art therapy. She's in our history books. I mean, so we've at least, had some idea about it. And then because I wasn't supported there and people don't really know what art therapists do when they hire them at these institutions, I saw the writing on the wall when they said they were going to bring Linda Gant in to train people in the ITR. I knew I was not going to be invited, and I wasn't. I was the only no art therapist was invited. Social workers and psychologists were, but they invited an art therapist to train their social workers and psychologists. So I had the desire, and I was like, well, they can't tell me what I can and can't do because I know I can get trained in ITR. So I did. And it was at the time when you guys were still doing the one in person in West Virginia. So I drove out. I was living in Maryland at the time. I drove out to West Virginia, did the training over a couple of weekends, I think, a few weekends. And then while I wasn't able to use it there, and I tried to be like, I'm an art therapist, I'm trained, I can do this, I can help. I was explicitly told, nope, art therapists are not doing trauma work. I even had my LPC, and I had gone to the credentialing office to get credentialed there, and they were like, we will never, ever credential art therapists. Like, there is such a mindset about what art therapists are and aren't. So I was like, okay. And I quickly got out of that job and moved on. But unfortunately, even though that was at least 7 or 8 years ago, that is still going on in institutions today, in major government institutions. Art therapists are hired either, and they're seen either as recreation therapists that kind of focus on art, or they're put under the umbrella of rehabilitation therapists, which are lumped together with occupational therapists, speech language therapists, and also recreation therapists. So that is what is a major hurdle, because they're not even seen as capable of doing trauma work or as in their scope of practice. Um, and although right now I have a supportive environment, it is still a hurdle. Like we are still trying to figure things out. I am not complete. No one is completely on board with our therapist doing trauma work right now, even though I've got more support than I've ever had before.
Well, how did you navigate to get that support? Because I know that's what a lot of people want to know. Like, how do they do that? And you've done a good job of that.
Well, one is perseverance. So I've been trained in the ITR for 8 years, and I found I've been employed. My past, I usually stayed at a place for about 3 years, and then I moved on. So I've worked at quite a few different places, um, and I found places where So one of the places I was able to, I was in a group practice, so I could pretty much do whatever I wanted, and I did the ITR, and one of the reasons I kept with the ITR is because it's so powerful and it helps a lot and it's needed. It's the only protocol out there where the person can actually get their story out in their way and then show the therapist, like, this is what happened to me. Look, look, this is what happened to me. And then they're able to hear it back, which the most common reaction to that is, that was weird. They hear their own story back, but it's weird because all this good stuff is happening in their brain. Like it's processing, it's getting that psychological and emotional distance, it's putting it in the past, it's doing so much work. So perseverance is my number one advice to anyone, is just, if you're trained in it, keep doing it, and you see it works, keep doing it, because when you finally do get a supportive supervisor, a supportive team, then you can tell them, like, I've done this over and over and it works. And then you can educate them. And that's the second part, is educate. Just let people know it exists. And then they're going to be like, what is it? And then you present it. So that's the second thing. And even though you present it, don't get your hopes up that it's going to be accepted by everyone, because it probably won't. Unfortunately, I know the ITERA that you guys are still doing the research part, and that is a hurdle at the moment. But the reasons it stayed so long too is because people see, clinicians have seen it works, and so they do it and they keep doing it. So perseverance and education, like don't keep it to yourself, even if you don't think you'll get support. Maybe some will and some won't, so you just never know. And then the third thing is, if you are in a non-supportive environment, like, keep looking, keep seeing if there's other opportunities out there where you can use it, and keep looking for that supportive environment. It took me a bit, but I'm finally in a place where my supervisor's on board. I educated people, they're on board. Not everyone, but a lot of people are. I've got a lot of people supporting this.
Yeah, you did a really good job of just stepping out there and educating them. And you want to tell people how you did that?
So when I was hired at the one I am at now, our therapists were doing what usually they do, is stabilization work. But what's unique about the place I'm at now is we have what's called, we have PTSD clinical teams, and they consist of social workers and psychologists, but they also hired our therapists to be part of these teams. And this is pretty unique in government situations. Our therapists are doing group work, and they're doing group work at various units. So they don't even have time for individual work. They don't even have time to even think about doing trauma work, even if they wanted to. They are working their butts off, just doing lots and lots of group work. So I'm at a place where I am doing individual work on a trauma team. But before I got there, our therapists were mainly focused on stabilization and grounding work. And then they would refer the people out to, and we work with adults, just to clarify, they would refer them out to the other clinicians to do the trauma processing. So when I was hired, my team didn't know I was even trained in the ITR. So during a meeting between my supervisor and other art therapists, I was like, that's what I do. Like, I'm doing the ITR. Like, that's what I'm doing now. That's what I've been doing. And then my supervisor, so timing was a big factor too, because at the time we were able to get a grant for education. And so my supervisor was like, is this something you guys would want to use that grant for to get trained? And everyone else was like on board. They're like, yeah, absolutely. And so they did. They used to get trained. And now we have more art therapists using the ITR to actually process trauma.
That's pretty unusual that you guys were actually included in the trauma team, right? Because I
Right.
don't
Yep.
think.
Yep. That's something we're trying to help work with others too, to help other people understand why art therapists are needed, and why we also um, it is within our scope of practice. It's just unfortunately we have been aligned with recreation therapy for a long time, and it's taking a long time to get unaligned. um, so no, and I love, recreation therapists are awesome and they do a wonderful job as well. It's just we don't do the same thing. We have different education as well. You don't need a master's for a recreation degree. You absolutely do for art therapy. So yes, right now I'm in a very unique, amazing situation, and we're really hoping to try and expand it.
I think a lot of therapists can do ITR in group, like different.
Oh yeah, they absolutely could if they wanted. So I no, I just to clarify, if you're in a government situation and you're not supported to do trauma work, I wouldn't recommend doing it at that government situation. Like, I would recommend getting experience outside, or you could even do parts of the ITR and use it in groups. So like the externalized dialogue is super helpful. Just them learning their parts and dialoguing with those parts, that's super powerful and amazing. The psychoeducation about the trauma responses you could use in a group. I got my experience like outside of the institution, and because I mean, there's online platforms you can do therapy on, and if you have your license and are qualified and all that. The reason I don't recommend doing it if you're not supported and not doing it in this institutions is because I mean, they see it's not they think it's not part of your scope of practice, and they will, yeah, you're just asking for trouble pretty much.
Well, it seems like there's a handful of pretty big federal agencies that have this PTSD group, and it sounds like they're kind of being more open-minded and recognizing art therapists,
Mhm.
especially art therapists trained in a trauma treatment, to be a part of it. So would you suggest that art therapists apply to these groups, or how could they kind of get in there?
I would say if there is uh, um, a PTSD clinic in your institution, to, yeah, let them know that, and if they are trained in trauma work or in the ITR, to let them know that they're interested in, approach them, say like, these are my credentials, this is what my experience is, I think I can help in this way and that, and list it, just try. Um, and see what they say and educate them as well, as to, showing them and showing the ITR is one of the best ways, rather than just talking about it. um
Because
yeah.
you've helped other people in different agencies kind of navigate this a little bit, right? I think.
This is the first agent, so a little bit, yes. Communication, also letting so if you're part of a bigger agency and the agency's all over the place, letting other art therapists know what you're doing, is communicating that as well, so that they know like, oh, maybe this is something I can do at this place. So yeah.
You had mentioned something, or just about how past occupational codes affected art therapists working in an institution. and how that's affected their ability to do trauma work. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
So this has been going on since the 70s or late 70s. That's when the occupational code for art therapists was aligned with recreational therapists. So right from the get-go, when you're hired by a government institution, you are already coded under recreation therapy. No, so you could, talk as long as you want about your credentials, like you're already on the track of recreational therapy or rehab therapy, however it operates. The occupational code for art therapists changed from being aligned to rec therapy to now we're under other therapy. So it has changed, but the coding in the institution still hasn't really changed much. So the barriers I was experiencing in government institutions when I started out in 2008, those are still there. Like our therapists and they're so in my experience, there's two types of art therapists. There are art therapists who absolutely do not mind doing group work and the stabilization work, and that's awesome because it's needed as well. And then there are therapists who do want to do trauma work and trauma processing and don't have that space or opportunity in that system that they're working in. And so even though the codes aren't really helping us at the moment, and change in large institutions takes a long time. Again, I would not give up, but like if you have the desire, don't let the institution dictate to you to what you get trained in and what you don't get trained in. If you are eligible and you've got the license, you've got the requirements you need, go for it.
Yeah, because I think it's powerful what you said about the certain parts of ITR you can still use that are very, very helpful, like even drawing parts,
Yep.
parts mapping. Do you want to talk about some of those things that you could use in group as well as externalized dialogue?
Yeah, I love the externalized dialogue and parts and true self because it's when they get it, when adults get it, they start talking in that language. They'll be like, "Oh, I felt that part come up or that hurt little boy part come up over the weekend, but I'm a 60-year-old man. Like I've got skills, so I let true self take control." So we're taught with the externalized. So parts map. I'm sorry. Let me start with the first thing you asked, Mary. The parts map is just bringing awareness to the person of what their parts are and what true self is. And true self, we teach people is the pretty much the positive aspects of your personality that no one can take away, that you're born with. It's always there, no matter if they're quiet or loud, they're always present. However, through life, parts start developing to help you out through life, through challenges, through traumas. And they can be hurt, they can be angry, they can be defensive. But just because they're there, it doesn't mean that we need to operate from them. And that's the biggest takeaway, or that people start learning is like, oh, just because I feel really hurt doesn't mean I need to operate from this hurt part. I can acknowledge that it's there, but then I can figure out, and that's where the externalized dialogue comes in. The externalized dialogue helps the person take emotional and psychological distance, and it helps to strengthen their true self, because true self's in the driver's seat. True self is talking to that part, finding out what that part needs through dialogue. So you're building a healthier relationship to your parts, and then you're strengthening true self. And so at the end of the day, you figure out what that hurt part needs. And then, but instead of that hurt part taking charge, that hurt part gives it that responsibility to true self. And true self is like, all right, I got this. So next time you ever need help, let me know. And so in that, even though it's a written dialogue, it helps behavior change, because now when they're actually in the real world outside a therapy session, interacting with other people, they remember that dialogue and they remember what they learned from it, and they can start noticing when those hurt parts come up, and instead of reacting from them, they kind of take a moment and they're like, no, okay, true self, we got this. And they come from a calmer place.
You know, that work that I saw on National Geographic where they were building the masks,
Mm-hmm.
that's parts work, right? I mean, do you want to talk about, like, there's different ways to do that, like just drawing or yeah.
Oh yeah, and that's why I love art therapy too, is because it helps the person can express themselves in, in pretty much whatever manner they want through the art, or whatever helps the most. So the masks is pretty that is a pretty uh popular image associated with art therapy, and it is really nice. It helps people to so we you can give a person a mask made out of paper mache or whatever, and then they can show you a real popular one with art therapists, or it can be, is inside outside. So what are you showing on the outside, and that's what you would put on, or what emotions are you showing on the outside, and that's what you would put on the outside. And then but what's really going on in the inside that you're not showing people. But with true self and parts, you could do that as well with a mask. So you could put like, okay, what parts are showing right now, but how is true self in the background? What does that look like too? And then you can do another mask later to see like, okay, how often is true self showing, or is it still in the background, and see if there's any changes to the mask. But yeah, there's lots of art therapy interventions that art therapists can come up with, because that's what we do best. We come up with our own stuff, our own interventions.
Yeah, I saw some beautiful, like, before and after. Like, this was someone working with combat veterans, and they had before deployment and then after deployment. And, it kind of was really true self in parts, what parts have been developed and stuff. But I know even doing externalized dialogue to be able to let someone draw these parts. Like, I saw one that was Rager, and then it was all the attributes about Rager, like the beliefs, the behaviors of this or that, and suicidal parts, and then all the things and the thoughts and behaviors that go around that, and helping someone recognize. You want to talk a little bit about that, about even like suicide is a part? Have you? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one too. And that can be really tough to get through, because being suicidal, or someone having suicidal ideations, it can really feel like that is all of you, and there is no difference between that part and true self. So that can really take a bit of work to even have the person realize like, oh, the suicidal ideation is just, it's not me, it's not all of me. Like, this is actually a way that this is a really hurt part that feels like this is a way to solve a problem, but it's not. So just helping them see that can be really powerful, to help them get distance from it, instead of in encapsulating suicidal ideation. And then also having true self talk to suicidal thoughts, or the suicidal part, can be really fruitful, because that's something they don't even think about, right? When someone's suicidal, they don't think about talking to the suicidal part, but that's where you get all the good information about what brought up the suicidal part. What's the job of the suicidal part? Even though it may seem like there's no good out of having a suicidal part, they're usually there for a reason. It came up for as a solution to something. So when you actually do dialogue it from true self, from that, cool, calm, collected, wise self, you find out more information about what that suicidal part might need. And you also, unburdening the part is a big thing too. So you want to unburden the suicidal part and give it relief, that it may think that it needs to be there, and take responsibility. And so Yeah, having that conversation with it is huge. And teaching people that is so powerful because they'll use it after session and after therapy as well. And suicidality is unfortunately, a huge thing going on with many populations because there's so much craziness in the world. It gives them hope, but it also, I think it gives them strength. Like it gives them strength they didn't realize they had, because, which in turn gives them hope because they, again, like when you are coming from a part, when you feel like that, like, let's say suicidal, when you feel like you're suicidal, like that's all you feel. But when you learn that's okay, just because I feel all of this doesn't mean I am all of this. Like, and you can take that step back and you teach yourself like, okay, I can actually think through this. I don't need to react from suicidal part just because it's really big right now. And I feel all of this really intense feelings right now. I have other tools I can use to get through this. So it is major.
Yes, that's really powerful. And I just, maybe you could give one last just kind of pitch to art therapists to not give up in these large government organizations because they affect so many people, and your influence can also affect the psychologists and social workers and other therapists working as the team. Like, can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. If you are a psychologist or a social worker, work on a team with an art therapist, try try not to assume you know what they do. Ask them what they do. Ask them what their credentials are. And then art therapists, if you are on a team in a government agency and you don't feel like you're being supported, or there's usually one clinician there's usually just one, at least one, that is supportive and that does listen. So, let them know, tell them. But if you are absolutely not getting any support at all, don't let that dictate to you what you do in regards to training. Like, get trained anyway. Find other places outside of work to get your experience because they do exist. It does take extra work. It does take money because you're probably not going to get reimbursed if they're not supportive. But it's about you standing up for yourself and getting trained, and again, I can't emphasize this enough. You never know when opportunities will arise where you can use it and where you actually might be able to be in an environment where you are supportive. So just because it's not happening today doesn't mean it'll never happen. And just because the environment in government institutions haven't changed that much in the last 15 years since I started, doesn't mean that places that are supportive don't exist, because I am finally in one. And we are trying to look at the bigger picture and help others as well. So please don't feel like it's a hopeless situation. There are different trauma protocols like PE, CPT, EMDR, but having the ITR available as well as an option is really crucial and is really nice for the patients that they even get that option to pick from. So that's also another benefit for hanging in there and trying, because it's not just about you doing the ITR, it's about the people that have access to it. It's about changing and healing people.
Yay. Well, thank you so much for your time and all the work that you've done. We really appreciate it. I know a lot of the art therapists will be really thankful to hear this, that there's hope in the large government organizations. So we'll be seeing you. I know you're training with us, and you're just great at ITR. So we appreciate all the effort that you've put out to and helping everybody. So we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.